The silver solstice gala blazed with 1,000 candles, their golden light reflecting off crystal chandeliers and the silk gowns of wolves who belonged. Kathleen stood at the garden's edge, fingers wrapped around a glass of wine she hadn't tasted, watching the glittering crowd through the arched doorways. The scent of pine and winter roses should have been intoxicating, but all she could smell was her own shame, sharp and bitter, clinging to her skin like the whispers that followed her everywhere. Unfit, rejected, broken. 3 months since Marcus had publicly severed their bond in front of the entire Crescent Moon pack. 3 months of being invisible, a ghost haunting the periphery of werewolf society. Yet here she was, chin lifted in defiance she didn't entirely feel, wearing a borrowed gown of champagne silk that made her feel like an imposter playing dress-up. Look, she actually came. The voice carried from inside, followed by cruel laughter. Kathleen didn't need to turn to know it was Vivienne, Marcus's new mate, the high-born alpha female he'd chosen over her. Her grip tightened on the glass. She'd come here to prove something, though she wasn't sure what anymore. That she could still hold her head high. That rejection hadn't shattered her completely. The justifications felt hollow now, standing alone while everyone else moved in packs, in pairs, in circles that had no space for a discarded Omega. Then she saw him. A figure cloaked in shadow, moving with predatory grace through the restricted section of the royal gardens. The moonlight caught the edge of dark armor beneath a heavy cloak, and something about the way he moved, lethal, purposeful, utterly unauthorized, made her pulse quicken. An intruder at the Alpha King's gala. The audacity was almost admirable. "Kathleen," Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to find him approaching, Vivienne draped on his arm like a trophy, both wearing matching expressions of false concern. "Leaving so soon? The night's just begun." The pity in his eyes was worse than hatred. It said, "Look how far you've fallen. Look how much better off I am." Panic clawed at her throat. She couldn't do this, couldn't stand here while they dissected her humiliation with surgical precision, couldn't let them see how much it still hurt. Her gaze snapped back to the shadowy figure, now pausing beneath an ancient oak tree, his back to the celebration. Something reckless ignited in her chest. Desperate. Wild. "Fine. If they want a spectacle, I'll give them one." Without allowing herself to think, Kathleen set down her glass and strode across the frost-kissed grass, her champagne gown whispering against the ground. She heard Vivienne's sharp intake of breath, Marcus calling her name, but she didn't stop. The intruder turned at her approach, and she caught a glimpse of dark eyes beneath the hood, surprised, dangerous, intensely focused. She didn't hesitate. Kathleen grabbed the front of his cloak and pulled him down, pressing her lips to his in a kiss meant to be brief, meant to be nothing more than a performance for the audience she knew was watching. But the moment their lips met, the world caught fire. Heat exploded through her veins, not the gentle warmth of attraction, but something primordial and overwhelming, like lightning striking her very soul. His scent hit her all at once, storm clouds and cedar, winter wind and something ancient that made her wolf whimper in recognition. The stranger went rigid for a heartbeat, then his hand came up to cup the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair as he claimed the kiss she'd started. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to push her away, confused or offended. Instead, he was kissing her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. Power rippled between them, hers rising to meet his in a way that should have been impossible. Omega wolves didn't generate this kind of energy. They didn't make alpha males tremble. When he finally pulled back, his eyes, no longer shadowed but blazing amber in the moonlight, searched her face with an intensity that stole her breath. His thumb traced her jaw with unexpected gentleness, and when he spoke, his voice was rough velvet and absolute authority. "Found you." The words vibrated through her chest, igniting something that had been dormant her entire life. Behind her, she heard gasps, the rustle of movement, but she couldn't look away from those burning eyes. Then came the sound of boots on stone, rapid and synchronized. The royal guard emerged from the palace, a dozen wolves in crimson and gold, and every single one of them dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty," they said in unison, heads bowed. The world tilted. The hooded man, no, the king, still held her, his hand warm against her neck, his lips curved in the faintest smile as reality crashed over her in waves. She hadn't kissed an intruder. She'd kissed Austin Blackthorne, the Alpha King, the most powerful werewolf on the continent. And judging by the silver marks now glowing faintly on both their wrists, marks that hadn't been seen in over a century, she'd done far more than that. She'd awakened a bond that would change everything. Chapter 1. The King Unmasked. Kathleen's first instinct was to run. Her second was to pretend this wasn't happening, that the marks on her wrist were a trick of moonlight, that the man still holding her wasn't who the guards claimed he was, that the entire Gala wasn't currently watching her unravel in real time. But Austin Blackthorne didn't let go. His hand remained steady at the nape of her neck, grounding her even as the world spun into chaos. "Your Majesty, we didn't know you'd left the northern wing." The guard captain's voice carried across the garden, urgent and apologetic. "Security wasn't notified." "I don't require an escort to walk my own grounds, Captain Thorne." Austin's voice cut through the night like a blade, still rough from their kiss, but carrying unmistakable command. His eyes never left Kathleen's face. "Though I appreciate your diligence." The crowd from the ballroom had spilled into the garden now, a glittering mass of shock and avid curiosity. Kathleen felt their stares like brands against her skin. She tried to step back, but Austin's thumb traced a gentle circle against her pulse point, a small gesture that somehow steadied her racing heart. "Impossible," someone whispered. "That's the crescent moon reject." "The marks," another voice hissed. "Do you see the marks?" Austin finally released her, but only to shrug off his cloak and drape it around her shoulders. It smelled like him, cedar and winter storms, and was still warm from his body. The gesture was unmistakably possessive, unmistakably claiming, and a ripple of shock moved through the assembled wolves. Marcus pushed through the crowd, Vivienne trailing behind him. His face had gone pale. "Your Majesty, there's been some mistake. This woman is..." "Mine." The word came out as a low growl that made every wolf in the garden bare their necks in instinctive submission. Austin stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Kathleen, and she realized with a jolt that he was protecting her. "Are you suggesting I don't recognize my own mate bond, Marcus Thorne?" The use of Marcus's full name and the connection to the guard captain made Marcus flinch. Kathleen's mind reeled. Mate bond? The silver marks glowing on her wrist suggested it was true, but this couldn't be real. Kings didn't bond with discarded omegas. They especially didn't bond with wolves who'd been publicly declared unfit. "I need to speak with you," Austin said, finally turning to face her fully. Up close, without the hood shadowing his features, he was devastating, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. "Privately." It wasn't really a request. Kings didn't make requests. But something in his expression, a vulnerability beneath the authority, made it feel like a choice. Like he was asking, not commanding. Kathleen glanced back at the crowd, at Marcus's stricken face, at Vivienne's barely concealed fury, at the hundreds of wolves who'd watched her fall and were now watching something impossible rise from the ashes. She pulled Austin's cloak tighter around her shoulders and met his gaze. "Lead the way, Your Majesty." Chapter 2. The Royal Ultimatum. The king's private study was nothing like Kathleen had imagined. She'd expected cold grandeur, marble and gold, and the trappings of absolute power. Instead, she found warmth. A fire crackling in a stone hearth, shelves crammed with books that actually looked read, and a desk covered in maps marked with his own handwriting. Austin closed the door behind them, and suddenly the room felt much smaller. "You've been looking for me." It wasn't a question. The way he'd said, "found you in the garden," the certainty in his touch, this hadn't been chance. He moved to a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, offering her one. When she hesitated, his mouth quirked. "It's not poisoned, though I understand your hesitation to trust me." Kathleen took the glass but didn't drink. "Why?" "Direct, I like that." Austin leaned against his desk, studying her with those unsettling amber eyes. 3 years ago, my father died from a curse that's plagued our bloodline for 5 generations. Every Blackthorn king has fallen to it: madness, then death, always before their 40th year. He paused, his jaw tightening. I have 7 months. The admission hung between them, stark and terrible. Kathleen's grip on the glass tightened. The court seers found a prophecy buried in our archives. A hidden lineage, Omegas descended from the original pack blessed by the moon goddess herself. Their bond could break the curse. His gaze dropped to the silver marks on her wrist, still faintly glowing. Your scent, winter roses and starlight, it matches the prophecy exactly. I've had trackers searching the continent for 2 years. So this, she touched her wrist, the bond mark burning beneath her fingers. This wasn't fate, it was convenience. It was survival. Austin set down his untouched glass. Mine and my kingdom's. When the king falls, civil war follows. The elders are already circling, pushing me to mate with a highborn alpha to secure military alliances before it's too late. Kathleen laughed, the sound bitter. And instead you got the pack reject. The unfit Omega. How inconvenient for you. No, the word came out fierce. Austin moved closer, and she could feel the heat rolling off him, the barely leashed power of his wolf. You're exactly who I need, but he stopped, seeming to weigh his words. I can't force you into this. The bond is real, but I'm asking you to make a choice. What choice? A strategic alliance. Pose as my chosen consort. Help me stabilize the kingdom and break this curse. In return, I'll give you everything you need. Status, protection, revenge if you want it. Every wolf who ever looked down on you will bow. Kathleen's heart hammered. A fake engagement. With very real benefits for both of us. Austin's voice dropped. The elders want me to choose an alpha mate. They'll fight this. But if you stand beside me, if you let me show them what you're capable of. His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. You'll never be at anyone's mercy again. It was everything she'd wanted. Protection, power, proof that she wasn't broken. But the marks on her wrist burned with a truth neither of them had spoken. Their bond wasn't fake at all. How long? She asked. Until the curse breaks, or, his eyes darkened, until one of us wants out. Kathleen drained her glass in one burning swallow and met his gaze. I accept. Chapter 3, The Gilded Cage. The Queen's suite was a prison wrapped in silk and gold. Kathleen stood at the window of her new chambers, watching the sun rise over sprawling palace grounds that felt more like a chessboard than a home. Every servant who entered bowed. Every guard who passed her door straightened to attention. No one met her eyes. She was utterly alone in a palace filled with thousands. The seamstress will arrive within the hour, my lady. The head chambermaid, a severe woman named Helena, set down a breakfast tray Kathleen hadn't requested. His Majesty has requested you be fitted for appropriate court attire. Appropriate. The word tasted like ash. Nothing about her had ever been appropriate. After Helena left, Kathleen forced herself to eat, though the food might as well have been cardboard. Through the walls, she could hear the distant sounds of the palace waking, footsteps, voices, the machine of governance grinding into motion. She was part of that machine now, a carefully placed piece in Austin's gambit to save his kingdom. And himself. She touched the bond mark on her wrist, still warm, still glowing faintly in the morning light. 3 days since the gala. 3 days of signed contracts and strategic briefings, and Austin treating her with perfect, distant politeness that made her want to scream. A knock at the connecting door between their suites made her tense. She hadn't known that door existed until yesterday. Come in. Austin entered, and Kathleen's traitorous heart stuttered. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usual immaculate appearance slightly rumpled. He discarded his formal jacket, his white shirt open at the collar, and there was something vulnerable about seeing him this way. You didn't sleep, she said. Elder Council meeting. They're already demanding I reconsider the engagement. He moved to her window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Apparently, a low-born Omega isn't suitable to break a royal curse. They might be right. They're afraid. Austin's voice was quiet. You threaten everything they've built their power on. The hierarchy, the bloodline politics, the idea that only highborn alphas matter. He finally looked at her, and the weariness in his eyes made her chest ache. Do you know what it's like to have every choice made for you? Every relationship evaluated for political advantage? Every moment of your life choreographed by people who see you as a symbol, not a person? Kathleen thought of pack meetings where she'd been decorative at best, invisible at worst. Of Marcus choosing Vivienne because her bloodline mattered more than Kathleen's heart. Of being told her entire life that her worth was determined by her rank. Yes, she whispered. I know exactly what that's like. Something shifted in Austin's expression, recognition, maybe, or relief at being understood. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. We're both trapped, he said softly. You by what they say you are, me by what they need me to be. The bond mark flared between them, warm and insistent. Kathleen covered his hand with hers, holding it against her face. Then maybe, she said, we trap each other instead, on our own terms. Austin's thumb traced her jaw, the gesture achingly gentle. I'd like that. For the first time since entering the palace, Kathleen didn't feel alone. Chapter 4, The First Test. The Royal Ascension Ball was a test, and everyone knew it. Kathleen descended the grand staircase in a gown of midnight blue that shimmered like starlight with each step, her hand resting lightly on Austin's arm. Below, hundreds of wolves watched, nobles, pack leaders, foreign dignitaries, all waiting to see if the low-born Omega would crumble under their scrutiny. She felt their judgment like knives against her skin. Breathe, Austin murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. You belong here more than any of them. She wasn't sure she believed that, but his certainty steadied her. They reached the ballroom floor and the crowd parted, a sea of silk and suspicion. The orchestra began a waltz, and Austin pulled her into his arms with practiced grace. You're doing beautifully, he said as they turned across the marble floor. Other couples joined the dance, circling them like sharks. They hate me. They fear you, there's a difference. His hand tightened at her waist. And they should. Kathleen caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd, her old pack, clustered near the refreshment tables. Marcus stood rigid, Vivienne beside him wearing a gown clearly meant to outshine Kathleen's. But it was the elder wolves she recognized that made her stomach twist. The ones who'd voted to exile her. The ones who'd called her unfit. When the waltz ended, Austin was immediately surrounded by dignitaries requiring his attention. Kathleen found herself alone at the edge of the floor, champagne in hand, trying not to look as abandoned as she felt. Still playing dress-up, I see. Vivienne's voice dripped poison. She'd approached with two other highborn alphas, their expressions united in disdain. Though I suppose when you're desperate enough, even a king can be fooled. Kathleen's grip tightened on her glass. I'm not interested in whatever game you're playing, Vivienne. No game, just concern. Vivienne's smile was razor-sharp. Everyone knows the king needs a proper mate, someone of quality, not a defective Omega who couldn't even hold onto a common pack wolf. The words hit their target. Kathleen felt the familiar shame rising, the voice that whispered she didn't belong, that this was all a mistake. Defective? Austin's voice cut through the conversation like winter frost. He materialized beside Kathleen, his presence making the three alphas step back instinctively. I must have misheard you, Lady Vivienne. Surely you weren't insulting my consort. The ballroom had gone silent. Everyone was watching now. Vivienne's face paled. Your Majesty, I only meant. You meant to remind everyone of your own insecurity. Austin's voice carried across the hushed crowd, each word deliberate and devastating. It must be difficult, knowing that a wolf you once dismissed now stands where you never could, that she possesses qualities you'll never understand, strength earned through suffering, grace born from surviving what would have broken lesser wolves. He turned to Kathleen, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. This wasn't performance. This was fury on her behalf, fierce and genuine. My consort is worth 10 of you, Vivienne, And if anyone in this court questions that again, his gaze swept the ballroom, touching every face. They'll answer to me. Austin offered Kathleen his arm. Shall we continue our dance? She took it, head high, and let him lead her back onto the floor. Behind them, the whispers erupted, but for once, they didn't matter. She had a king, willing to go to war for her honor. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe she deserved it. Chapter 5, Lessons in Power. The training courtyard was empty in the pre-dawn light, just Kathleen and Austin, and the mist rolling off the distant mountains. She'd been awake for hours, unable to sleep after another dream of silver light and ancient voices calling her name. You felt it last night, Austin said, circling her slowly. He'd stripped down to training clothes, simple black that emphasized the lethal grace of his movements. During the confrontation with Vivienne, tell me what happened. Kathleen wrapped her arms around herself. Heat, like lightning in my veins. For a moment I wanted to, she stopped, embarrassed. Wanted to what? Make her kneel. The admission came out barely above a whisper. Not through fear, through something else, something that felt wrong. It's not wrong, it's your birthright. Austin moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the quiet morning. Omega power isn't weakness, Kathleen. It's influence, persuasion, the ability to reach into another wolf's soul and make them want to follow you. His hand lifted to her face, tilting her chin up. But you've spent your whole life suppressing it because they told you it was shameful. It feels dangerous. All power is dangerous. The question is whether you'll let fear control you or learn to control it. His thumb brushed her lower lip, and she felt that familiar heat spark between them. Close your eyes. She obeyed, hyper-aware of his nearness, the Cedaran storm scent of him, the warmth radiating from his body. Feel the bond between us, Austin murmured. Not the mark on your wrist, the actual connection, the thread that ties your soul to mine. Kathleen reached inward, past her fear and doubt, searching for what he described. And there, a silver cord of light, pulsing with shared heartbeat, twinning them together in ways that terrified her. Now push. She didn't understand, but she tried, sending her awareness along that cord. Austin's sharp intake of breath told her she'd done something right. She felt his emotions bleeding through, desire, yes, but also wonder and a bone-deep loneliness that mirrored her own. Good, he said roughly. That's how you influence, how you command, not through domination but through connection. His hands framed her face now, and when she opened her eyes, his were blazing gold. Do you feel how much power you have over me right now? Her heart hammered. This wasn't training anymore. Austin. He kissed her, and it was nothing like the impulsive collision in the garden. This was deliberate, thorough, a claiming that had nothing to do with strategy or prophecy. Kathleen melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, the bond mark blazing bright enough to see even through closed eyelids. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Austin rested his forehead against hers. This isn't fake anymore, he said. Is it? Kathleen's fingers traced the bond mark on his wrist, matching the one on hers. I don't think it ever was. The deal. Forget the deal. She pulled him back down, kissing him with all the certainty she'd been afraid to acknowledge. I choose this. I choose you. Austin's answering smile was devastating. Then let me teach you to be the queen this kingdom needs. He kissed her again as the sun crested the mountains, burning away the mist and all their careful pretenses with it. For the first time since entering the palace, Kathleen didn't feel alone. Chapter 6, The Sabotage. Kathleen had learned to recognize danger in the tilt of a head, the false warmth of a smile. So when Lady Seraphina, a highborn alpha from the Northern Territories, offered her tea in the palace gardens, every instinct screamed trap. But refusing would have been a political misstep Austin couldn't afford. So Kathleen accepted, Helena trailing behind as chaperone, and tried to ignore the way Seraphina's perfect smile never reached her eyes. You've caused quite a stir, Seraphina said, pouring from an ornate silver service. The court hasn't stopped talking about the king's little Omega. Little, the word was a calculated strike. Kathleen accepted her cup with steady hands. I imagine they'll find something new to discuss soon enough. Perhaps. Seraphina's gaze was predatory. Though some of us remember when His Majesty paid court to more suitable matches, before this curse business made him desperate. The tea was perfectly brewed, fragrant with jasmine and something else Kathleen couldn't identify. She brought it to her lips, then stopped. The scent beneath the jasmine, wrong, bitter. Helena gasped, "My lady, don't." The cup shattered on the flagstones as Kathleen dropped it. Seraphina was already moving, faster than should have been possible, a concealed blade flashing in the sunlight. Kathleen threw herself backward, her training with Austin kicking in, but the blade caught her shoulder, burning like ice and fire together. Wolfsbane. The poison flooded her system instantly. She hit the ground as her legs gave out, vision swimming. Seraphina loomed over her, the mask of civility completely dropped. "He was supposed to be mine. The elders promised me, but you're nothing. And when you're dead, he'll choose someone worthy." Through the haze of pain, Kathleen felt the bond mark blazing on her wrist. Felt Austin's fury crashing through their connection like a tidal wave. Then he was there. She'd never seen him move like that, pure lethal grace, closing the distance between the palace and gardens in impossible seconds. His eyes were full alpha gold, his wolf so close to the surface that his form seemed to shimmer. Seraphina barely had time to scream before Austin had her by the throat, lifting her off the ground. The sound that came from him wasn't human, a roar of such primal rage that every wolf in the palace grounds dropped to their knees in instinctive submission. "You touched her." His voice was barely recognizable, scraped raw with fury. "You poisoned what's mine." "Your Majesty, please," Seraphina choked out, her face purpling. "Austin," Kathleen's voice was weak, the wolfsbane spreading through her veins like liquid fire. "Don't." He looked at her then, and the devastation in his eyes nearly broke her. With visible effort, he dropped Seraphina, who crumpled to the stones gasping. Guards materialized from everywhere at once. "Get her out of my sight," Austin snarled. "Lock her in the dungeons until I decide how merciful I'm feeling." Then he was kneeling beside Kathleen, gathering her into his arms with infinite care. His hands shook as he brushed hair from her face. "Stay with me. Do you hear me? Stay." "The curse," she managed. "You can't afford to lose control." "I can't afford to lose you," his voice cracked. "Nothing else matters, not the curse, not the kingdom, nothing. You understand, you're everything." The bond mark pulsed between them, his desperation pouring through it. Kathleen reached up with her good hand, touching his face. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Austin pressed his lips to her forehead, and she felt wetness on her skin that might have been tears. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe she deserved it. Chapter 7. Secrets of the Blood. Kathleen woke 3 days later in the Royal Healing Wing, her shoulder bandaged and the wolfsbane finally purged from her system. Austin was asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he hadn't left her side. She should have felt grateful, loved, even. Instead, all she felt was the growing unease that had taken root during her fevered dreams, fragments of conversation she'd overheard through delirium, words that wouldn't leave her alone. When Austin stirred, she pulled her hand away. His eyes opened immediately, relief flooding his features. "Kathleen, thank the goddess, I thought—" He reached for her but stopped when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" "Tell me about the prophecy." Something shuddered in his face. "I already did. The hidden lineage, the curse." "Tell me all of it." Her voice was steady despite the trembling in her chest. "The part you left out." Austin's jaw tightened. He stood, moving to the window, his shoulders rigid. "What did you hear?" "The healers talking. They thought I was unconscious." Kathleen pushed herself up despite the pain in her shoulder. "Something about my blood being the key, about sacrifice and the true breaking of the curse requiring." Her voice cracked. "Tell me I misunderstood." The silence stretched too long. "Austin." "The full prophecy," he said finally, not turning around. states that the hidden lineage Omega's bond will break the curse. But the final line, the one the seers buried, says the breaking requires her willing sacrifice, her life for mine. The words hit like physical blows. Kathleen felt the room tilt. You knew. From the beginning, you knew. I didn't believe it. Austin spun to face her, desperation in his eyes. I thought bonding would be enough, that the seers were wrong, that there had to be another way. You were looking for someone to die for you. Her laugh was bitter. And you found the perfect candidate, the broken, desperate Omega with nothing to lose. That's not Kathleen, no. I was looking for a solution, yes, but then I met you. Everything changed when I met you. He moved toward her, but she held up a hand. Don't you dare. Tears burned her eyes. Was any of it real? The training, the defense at the ball, the pretty words about choosing me, was it all just to make sure I'd be willing to die when the time came? I love you. The words were raw, torn from somewhere deep. I love you, and I will not let this prophecy take you. I've had every scholar in the kingdom searching for alternatives. I would burn this whole world down before I let anything happen to you. But you didn't tell me. Kathleen's voice broke. You let me fall in love with you knowing I might be your sacrifice, knowing that every moment we had together was borrowed time. Because I couldn't bear to lose you before I had to. Austin's composure cracked completely. Because I'm selfish and terrified, and I don't know how to rule a kingdom without you, let alone exist in a world where you're gone. Kathleen touched the bond mark on her wrist, feeling his anguish pouring through it. But beneath it was something else, the weight of his deception, the calculation behind every kiss. Get out, she whispered. Kathleen. Get out. He left, and she was alone with the knowledge that everything she'd believed was built on lies. He kissed her again as the sun crested the mountains, burning away the mist and all their careful pretenses with it. Chapter 8, The Betrayal. The summons came at dawn, delivered by a grim-faced Helena who refused to meet Kathleen's eyes. The elder council demanded her presence in the throne room within the hour. Austin would be there. She hadn't spoken to him in 3 days. Kathleen dressed in the simplest gown she owned, gray silk that felt more like armor than adornment. If they wanted to strip her of the illusion of royalty, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cling to it. The throne room was packed. Every noble family, every pack leader, every wolf with even a trace of political power had gathered to witness what was clearly meant to be an execution. Not literal, perhaps, but close enough. Austin stood before his throne, not sitting on it, a subtle acknowledgement that his position was under threat. His eyes found hers the moment she entered, and the longing in them made her chest ache despite everything. Elder Cornelius, the council's leader, stepped forward. He was ancient, his hair white as snow, his eyes sharp as broken glass. We are gathered to address a matter of utmost importance to the kingdom's survival, the king's choice of consort. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kathleen kept her spine straight, her face blank. His Majesty has aligned himself with a wolf of no standing, no bloodline, no value to the crown. Cornelius's voice carried to every corner of the massive room. An Omega rejected by her own pack as unfit. This union weakens us at a time when we need strength. Careful, Cornelius. Austin's voice was lethal quiet. You speak of my mate. We speak of a mistake that must be corrected before it destroys the monarchy. Another elder, Lady Morgana, moved forward. The curse grows stronger. You have weeks, not months, yet you waste time on a wolf who brings nothing to the alliance but scandal and weakness. She brings more than any of your highborn candidates ever could. Sentiment. Cornelius waved a dismissive hand. The council has voted. You will set aside this inappropriate attachment and choose a proper mate from the approved candidates, or we will have no choice but to invoke the Emergency Powers Act and remove you from the throne for the kingdom's protection. The gasps were audible. The Emergency Powers Act hadn't been invoked in 200 years. It would strip Austin of his crown, place the elders in control until a new king could be selected. You don't have the authority, Austin snarled. We have the votes. 12 of the 15 great houses stand with us. Morgana's smile was cruel. Your father spent decades building alliances. You've spent weeks defying tradition for a wolf who isn't worth the air she breathes. Kathleen felt every eye turn to her. This was the moment she'd been dreading since childhood, the confirmation that she was, and always would be, not enough. You want me to walk away? Her voice cut through the whispers, clear and steady. Is that it? I leave, you let him keep his crown. Kathleen, no, Austin started. Yes, Cornelia said. Disappear. Return to whatever obscurity you came from. Save us all the embarrassment of watching this circus continue. She looked at Austin then, really looked at him. Saw the fear in his eyes, not for his crown, but for her. Saw the love he'd claimed, real and devastating despite the lies that had birthed it. I'll go, she said quietly, but not because you command it. Austin's face drained of color. Don't do this. Kathleen turned and walked toward the doors, each step in agony, the bond mark on her wrist screaming in protest. Behind her, she heard Austin's roar of fury, the sound of something shattering. But she didn't look back. Austin pressed his lips to her forehead, and she felt wetness on her skin that might have been tears. Chapter 9, The Sovereign Bond. Kathleen made it to the palace gates before the world tilted sideways. The bond mark on her wrist blazed white-hot, and through their connection she felt Austin's agony, not emotional but physical. The curse, moving faster now that she'd severed their proximity. She stumbled, catching herself against the iron gates. Behind her, screams erupted from the throne room. Helena appeared at her side, breathless. My lady the king, he's collapsed. The curse. Kathleen was already running. She burst back into the throne room to find chaos. Austin was on his knees, veins of black spreading up his neck, his eyes flickering between amber and a sickly gray. Elder Cornelius stood frozen, his triumph curdling to horror as he realized what he'd done. Get away from him. Kathleen's voice carried power she'd never accessed before, pure Omega command that made every wolf in the room step back involuntarily. She dropped to her knees beside Austin, taking his face in her hands. Look at me. Stay with me. You left. His voice was broken. Can't blame you, but the curse, it's connected to the bond now. Separation accelerates it. Then I'm not going anywhere. She pressed her forehead to his, feeling the bond mark pulse frantically. Do you hear me? I'm not leaving. Not for them, not for anyone. The prophecy. To hell with the prophecy. Kathleen closed her eyes, reaching deep into that well of power Austin had helped her unlock. She felt the silver thread of their bond, felt the black poison of the curse wrapped around it like thorns. I won't die for you, Austin. We're going to live, together. She pushed everything she had into that connection, not trying to sacrifice herself, but to share the burden. To show the curse that it couldn't take one without taking both, that their bond was stronger than any ancient magic could break. The power that erupted from them was blinding. Silver light flooded the throne room, and Kathleen felt the curse recoiling, screaming, fighting against something it had never encountered before. Two souls so completely intertwined that they'd become one. The prophecy hadn't been about sacrifice. It had been about unity. When the light faded, the black veins were gone. Austin's eyes were clear amber, his breathing steady. The bond mark on both their wrists glowed pure silver, no longer flickering but constant. Permanent. Kathleen sagged against him, exhausted, and his arms came around her like he'd never let go. You came back, he whispered. I never really left. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. The lies, the prophecy, they hurt. But I choose you anyway, not because of duty or curses, but because I love you, even when you're an idiot. Austin's laugh was shaky. I love you, and I swear no more secrets. Elder Cornelius cleared his throat, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Your Majesty, the council, can accept my queen or find themselves replaced. Austin rose, pulling Kathleen up with him. She just saved my life and broke a 5-generation curse. I'd say that proves her worth. The crowd had begun to kneel, one by one, until the entire throne room bowed before them. Austin guided Kathleen to the throne, but instead of making her stand beside it, he sat and pulled her down to sit with him, not beside, but as an equal. He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her bond mark. "All hail Queen Kathleen," he said, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "My mate, my equal, my salvation." The response was thunderous. "All hail the Queen." Kathleen looked out at the bowing wolves, the ones who'd rejected her, the ones who'd scorned her, the ones who'd tried to break her. She'd entered this palace as a broken Omega playing a role. She would rule it as a queen who'd chosen her own destiny. He left, and she was alone with the knowledge that everything she'd believed was built on lies. What do you think about Kathleen? Do you think she can survive much more than this? Is she powerful to you? Let me know your thoughts and where you are watching from in the comments, as this also gives me a clue of how wide my stories are reaching. Stay connected to our stories. Never miss a moment by subscribing now. Our next story explores around an alpha-disabled son who was ignored by every Luna candidate. Keep in touch as we bring to you the full story on our next video.